Good morning. Good morning to each of you. I am Dr. Corrine Johnson, and I would like to welcome each of you on this morning to plug into the power of prayer. I am so grateful and thankful to God for each of you on this morning, for pressing your way up to get on here to hear what the Spirit of the Lord desires to impart into us on this morning. And so, good morning to each of you. Those of you that are watching from YouTube, those of you that are tuning in from TikTok, good morning to you all. Go ahead on and say good morning so I'll know you're here. And so, as you are saying good morning, also go ahead on and like, tag, and share the video with some other people that you believe that need to leave the past behind and transition to a new place where God is calling them to. And so, as always, we certainly honor the Lord on this morning. We thank Him for yet another opportunity to be here. And so on this morning, we are going to be continuing on in our series entitled Leave the Past Behind. And on this morning, we're going to be focusing in on transition is not a group effort. Transition is not a group effort. And so we have to understand that during transition, a lot of times we're vulnerable, right? And a lot of times we're vulnerable because during transitions, sometimes when God gives us instruction, a lot of times, even though we're being obedient to walk in those instructions, sometimes it can seem like God is silent. Sometimes it seems like He's far away. Sometimes it can seem like you're all alone, like you're by yourself doing what God told you to do. So during those times of transition, you're very vulnerable. And so therefore, proper connections are critical during those periods of transition. But the timing of them is even more a significant factor because the enemy doesn't want you to leave those old expired connections and relationships, right? And so what he does is when he sees you progressing forward, what he will do is he will send people that has absolutely nothing to do with your purpose, absolutely nothing to do with your destiny, and they will cause you to abort what you're carrying. They will cause you to be stagnated in that forward progression. And so, in the early stages of transition, and when I say early stages, I mean you just got a word from the Lord. You're getting up, you're walking towards the place where God has told you to move towards, right? It is important during those times to become solid and gather your bearings before inviting other people, right? And connections to come into your life. And so at first, transition is not a group effort. You know, on Tuesday, I believe it was, we talked about Jacob and Esau, right? So we all enter this world alone. And so the womb represents the place where we are nurtured in darkness and cradled and kept comforted. And so while life connections are vital during those critical stages of transition, a lot of times they can create conflict. And so transition is an individually intimate and extremely personal process. Therefore, it is so very important that you can effectively discern where you are during various stages of your transitioning process. And so, still, I have found that because of fatigue, that a lot of times we will experience in transition because we long for that place of being comfortable, right? And so, in the spirit of comfort, it comes in the form of people. Sometimes the enemy will begin to send people your way to keep you stuck so that you don't make any forward progression. And so sometimes these people that the enemy sends, sometimes they don't mean any harm, right? But the goal of most connections during transitions are meant to cause stagnation. The goal of most connections during transition are meant to cause stagnation. And so many times people who attempt to connect during these times have identified within you that provides a sense of commonality. And so you see these are the people, especially those who are experiencing transition themselves, that they want to make sure that you're all right. And so they want to make sure that you're okay, that they really don't have the answers to help you advance towards forward progression. In fact, they don't even know how to help. They just want you to be okay. They love you and they want what's best for you. And sometimes when people love us and they genuinely do want what's best for us, sometimes they cause us to stay in comfort zones because we can share information with those individuals, right? We can share that information and say, you know what, God told me to do such and such. And because those individuals love you so much, they may say, well, I don't think you heard God. I really just don't think you heard God tell you that, because all of your family lives here. Your children live here. Why would you want to move halfway across the country because you say that's what God said and you don't know nobody over there? They don't necessarily do it in a harmful way, but because they love you and they want to stay connected to you, sometimes they'll cause you to disobey what it is that you know that God has already told you to do. And so, however, in the grand scheme of things, they are coddlers. They don't push growth. They want you to be with them. And so, therefore, since they want you to be with them, they don't want you to move halfway across the country where you don't know nobody at, because they don't want you to grow. They want you to stay there so they can coddle you in that comfort zone. And so they are hoping to create a community of coddlers. And so, though it can be, this is not always, I'm not talking about coddlers in a sexual way now. I'm talking about these individuals are not clear on their own purposes and they want you to rest with them. So most of the times their actions are very subtle. And most of the time aren't even aware of why they want this connection. So if you succumb to it, to whatever it is that they have to offer, and then begin to develop those soul ties with them, and then you're stuck there with them and you're not making any forward movement. So you'll be bound as soon as you look up, and then you'll see it'll be 10 years later that have passed by and you still sitting there with that soul tie listening to them tell you, oh, I don't believe God told you, to pack up and move all the way across the country. I just don't think you heard the voice of God. And so, while some pregnancies might be delayed, sometimes when a woman is pregnant, sometimes the pregnancy can go beyond 40 weeks, right? But we know that babies cannot remain in the womb forever. And so when this happens, when the mother is overdue, the physicians become involved, ultimately inducing the pregnancy, causing the baby or babies to come forth with assistance. And so the prolonged pregnancy goes from becoming a nurturing environment to a hazardous environment by putting both the baby and the mother at risk. And so just like the baby, sometimes we can gather our groups and waste valuable time, countless months, and even years dwelling in a place that you were supposed to just simply pass through. And so remember, when it comes down to transition, transition is supposed to be a place of transportation. But instead, a lot of us, we build a townhouse. And, you know, in that place of transition, we'll build a townhouse. We'll build a condominium there, you know, where actually it was supposed to just be a tent for you to spend the night in, get up and get your bags and move on to the next place. And so, as I mentioned, you risk the accumulation of soul ties if you go through transition with a group. Because a lot of times when we go through transition with a group of people, you know, we're always hungry for, what do you think about this? Well, you know, God told me a particular thing. What do you think about it? And when we're in groups like that, sometimes those people will talk us out of what God said. So your reliance on them through this very critical time can create a codependency that's unhealthy for the leader that's on the inside of you to exist. And so when you have improper connects, it is possible to be blinded. And so therefore you cannot fully see what is at stake by listening to what people are telling you. And so sometimes it takes years to unravel the depths of what a wrong connection can infuse. We cannot afford to be connected to wrong people in this season. And so what we need to be connected to is faith fuelers. Faith fuelers, right? Because sometimes during transition, many of us are prone to becoming isolated with our own thoughts, with our own vision, with our own purposes. But however, there is a fine balance in remaining aware of the wrong connections in an effort not to miss the right connections. And so, yes, there are critical times of transition in connecting with someone that could cause us stagnation. But however, during other times of transitions, connections are essential and act as a lifeline for many of us. And so usually after the necessary time of isolation, that's when God will begin to have those faith fueler relationships show up. There are those relationships that need to be nurtured and development, so they typically flow relatively easily. So these people are those that make up elements of your trusted team. You know, they are what I call, you know, the term faith fuelers, right? They put fire up under you and help you to walk by faith to do and fulfill what God has told you to fulfill, right? And so you can easily identify them because these are those that when all of your faith is gone, they are sensitive enough to lead you back to the place of strength, that they can lead you back to the place of peace. They are those that we can partner up in the spirit and give you what God said. That will begin to come to you with a word when you're thinking about going back, when you're thinking about giving up, when you're thinking about throwing in the towel. Those faith fuelers are the one that will come and give you a word from God that will calm your frustration and cause you to refocus on the fullness of what you have been called to do. And so yet the time of their presence must maintain a balance. So the danger in having the trusted people or the faith fuelers in too close at pivotal times. And so if this is not intentionally monitored, soon your ear will deafen to the voice and the leading of God, and you're going to begin to depend solely on the voice of people instead of the voice of God. And so during transition, those are times that God, most of the time, is going to tell you to do stuff that you really don't want to do. And so that's why there must be balance that is maintained, because you got to have great discernment and great wisdom, because transition is not an easy process. Because most of the in transition, you're in transition because God has asked you to give up something. You're in transition because God has asked you to surrender something to him. You're in transition because God has asked you to leave some relationships, some people, some places, and some things behind. So what's my point here? The sensitivity of the various times of your transition is pivotal at the start. Like Esau, you know, you got to make sure that you watch for the snatchers. And as you begin to dive into the process, you must be cautious to not develop allegiances that connect with your vulnerabilities, which can cause great stagnation in your life. And so hence, you must endure the periods of isolation, because during transition, there will be periods of isolation, which are great and necessary elements of transition. But you got to remain keen enough to be able to identify those faith fuelers that are assigned to you, and yet remain so delicate as to not substitute their voice for the voice of God. Faith fuelers are voices from God. Most of the time when there's a faith fueler that's in your life, that they're operating in your life because they're able to hear from God. They'll tell you what God is saying. When you want to give up, they'll begin to give you a word from the Lord that'll push you on to the next place. And so transition is not a group effort. We got to know that this morning. Just because you're connected to people that you feel like that can begin to speak a word into your life, that doesn't mean that God intends for you to take them with you. Because when God, when he sends you into transition, most of the time you go into an isolated place. And then when you come out of that isolated place of being just you and God, because God sends you into that isolation because he wants you to get real familiar with hearing his voice. And so you got to make sure that during those transition times that you're not replacing the voice of God with the voice of other people. And so on this morning, transition is not a group effort. It is not. So don't feel pressured to drag people along with you where God is taking you. Not saying that there's anything wrong with some of the people. Some of them, God wants you to disconnect from because he knows that they'll derail your destiny. But there are some good people that some of us are connected to, but they just can't go because they're not ready. They're not ready to navigate the place where God is taking you. And if you take them with you anyway, Lot, if you take them with you anyway, Abram, God told him leave. He didn't tell him to take Lot with him, but he was going to drag Lot along with him. And Lot caused him so much trouble that he could have avoided if he had fully obeyed the voice of God. Some of us, we've got to learn to fully obey the voice of God so we don't run into trouble, unnecessary trouble on the way to transition. And so on this morning, when you're transitioning, it may be a group of folk that you connected to right now. And God is letting you know this morning that it's not a group effort. God said, I'm calling you, or not them, I'm calling you. And as you release some people and let them go, that's when you'll go into that isolation place. And when you come out of isolation, that's when God starts sending those destiny helpers. That's when God starts sending those faith fuelers your way to help push you to the next place in God. And so on this morning, I certainly pray that this word has been a blessing to your life. And I pray that if you haven't gotten anything else this morning, you got to know that transition is not a group effort. It is not. We cannot continue to drag people along with us that don't desire to go where God is calling us. And you be talking about, well, I've been friends with Susan for 25 years. We've done everything together. We traveled together. We did this together. If God say leave Susie behind, you better leave Susan behind, or you're going to run into a lot of unnecessary trouble on your way to destiny. And so on this morning, I certainly thank the Lord for each of you for tuning in and joining with me on this morning. And so I certainly thank God for those of you that are here every morning that press your way up to get on here to hear what the Lord has to say. That's such a blessing. And I see you all on here, and I just pray that every series that I have done, even the series that we're in the midst of right now, I pray that it is equipping you and empowering you and building you to be all who God has called you to be. And so on this morning, I'm not going to go into prayer this morning because I'm already straining my voice to say what I've said thus far. And so this is going to be another morning where we get off, and I want you all to go, and I want you all to begin to pray. Have your prayer time when you get off of here. Get in your word, read some scripture before you go to work. For those of you that are going to work, because I know many of you are still off because of the weather, so, and for those of you that feel safe enough to get out and go to different places, please be careful as you are driving. My sister said that she was coming from work. She's an RN nurse. And whereas it normally takes her about maybe 15 minutes to get from work to home, it took her a whole hour because she chose to be careful and drive slow. But she said that there was another car that came flying past her. And when she got a little bit up ways the road, that car was still driving forward, but it was driving sideways. It was driving sideways because obviously they had tried to hit the brake to slow down, and that snow just took them on sideways. And so be careful as we are maneuvering back out, because remember, at this stage, the ice is more dangerous than the snow. Because when you get on that ice, you be driving down the road, and all of a sudden you think you at the skating rink, you get to slide and you can't stop sliding. And so let's be careful. Let's use wisdom. If you don't have to go anywhere, don't go anywhere. Stay home. Use wisdom. If you can, just stay home and use wisdom. But if you just got to get out and go somewhere, drive at a slow speed. Pay attention to your surroundings and other drivers and everything that's going on on the road, because it is still dangerous with this snow melting and turning into ice. And so on this morning, once again, when you all get off of here, go ahead on and have your prayer time, have your study time, and hopefully on tomorrow morning, I'm going to be, when we get off of here today, I'm going to make me some ginger and some honey and some lemon tea to try to soothe my throat a little bit, because I'm straining just to have, teaching just a little bit that I taught on this morning, because y'all know I usually go a little bit longer than this, but my throat is bothering me, so I'm going to stop here. But however, I pray that you all have a blessed day on today, and I pray that you will like, tag, and share the video with some other people that that need to hear this word. And so thank you all so much once again for tuning in. And if it is the will of the Lord, we will see you all back here on tomorrow morning for plugging into the power that will only take place as the believers begin to rise up and pray. God bless you. Go forth on today and have a blessed day.